Ladies and gentlemen, MrCropper here. Let's talk about this part 2 of this video right here. This is a viewer question on motivation, MrCropper Rambles. We're now going to do part 2 of that video, where MrCropper talks about the two things that he forgot to talk about the first time, because it was just a quick off-the-cuff video. Time, number 1. This is 1 and 2. So point number 1 is time, okay? For motivation, time is important. For example, you say, how was Isaac Newton motivated to do the law of gravity? I tell you that there was plague at Cambridge, and he had to leave the city for 2 years, and he went to his the ranch where he grew up, and had to stay there for 2 years. And he was bored, and everyone was isolating themselves from each other because of plague. And he was bored on a farm for 2 years. That's when he wrote the theory of gravity. You say to me, what about Galileo? Bit of a genius, did this and that. I say yes. For one thing, professorship at a university, paid to sit around and think. Not particularly important or telling for us. More importantly, when he got locked under house arrest, because he produced some of his most important work of his life while he was under house arrest. You say to me, Machiavelli, brilliant guy, told the prince how he should run a country. I say to you, Machiavelli wrote The Prince while he was locked in a dungeon, and addressed it to the prince, or whatever. It was a scandal about. I think he addressed it to the prince who locked him away, or maybe after he wrote it, it got locked away. Some scandal about that. Once upon a time, Michelangelo was at the Sistine Chapel sitting and just looking. And some jealous bishop or priest came in and said, what's going on here? What are you just sitting around? And went and told the king. Said, you're paying this great artist this prestigious to do this. And he's just sitting in there on a chair. He just sits. So Michelangelo was called before the king to explain himself. And Michelangelo said, well, I don't need to explain to someone as intelligent as you, Your Honor, that greatness is achieved not by immediate impulsive action, but after careful thought. Now, MrCropper has just regurgitated his words, but you get the idea. That you do have to sit around and think about things, okay? So, motivation partially comes from leisure, from having the time to consider whatever it is that you're considering. Now, what are you motivated about? Is it going to the gym or getting a degree or whatever? You need to think on why it's important. Now, if you're working 2 jobs, and then as soon as you get out of both jobs, you go home and you got kids screaming at you, and then you fall asleep, I don't know if you've got enough leisure time to really think about and compute. Because we have free will on the one hand, but we're also finite creatures on the other hand. And if you're cramming your consciousness full of all kinds of things all day, and then you're exhausted and go to sleep, when are you ever going to stop and think about things and figure them out? So time and leisure, taking time, is important. That really does have something to do with it. By the way, those of you who are wondering whether or not you should go throw $5 or $10 to MrCropper, you should, because his ability to make these videos depends on his time, as we are seeing here. Now, number 2 is tools or materials. This one's going to be a little more real world, a little less philosophical. In this one, I just give you the basic advice that whatever it is that you're interested in, you do need to get some basic tools together. Now, I also believe you need to use those tools, so you've got to have a balance. You should not be the type of person who says, I'm going to go into woodworking. But first I need a bandsaw and a skill saw and a table saw and a sander and a drill press. And if you go with that attitude, you'll never start woodworking. My attitude is toward wood, if I'm going to start woodworking, is you can't even think about it without some tools, so get those tools and then build the project you can build with those tools. Okay? Now, if you look at it that way, then it's not a sin to get those tools. Now, those tools would be a hammer, a saw, maybe a little handheld sanding machine, maybe a bucket of primer or paint or stain or something, you know, 50, 70 bucks for some stuff. You set it in the corner, and some weekend you're ready. You take the wood, you start hammering and sawing, and you start going crazy, right? And you build whatever, just a small end table or something. And that's your first project. Now, then you can move forward and get your table saw and your band saw and your other stuff in time. So number one, do get the tools, okay? Now, let's say it's not woodworking. Let's say that your tools is that you want to learn philosophy, let's say, because when I was 16, I was in this boat. I went and got the tools, which to me were the books I was wondering about. Now, back in those days, there weren't reliable big bookstores, or I didn't know about them, and now bookstores are closed. So I didn't know about reliable bookstores. I just went to Media Play at the time, which was this big, like, Staples but for music and movies. And I went in there and I just spent like 120 bucks on a couple of books by Nietzsche, a book by Hegel, a couple books by Kant. You know, I didn't really get much for the money because I paid full price. What I did is I just said, I'm gonna get some Nietzsche. And I just went in there, I got a couple books by Nietzsche. And I didn't care about the price. One of the very few times in my life that I bought books regardless of the price. I always only buy on sale or something. So I just said to myself, I need the tools to do this. That launched my Nietzsche career, and Nietzsche is awesome. Nietzsche's fun. Nietzsche's fun. You should check out my Nietzsche series. Okay, so material. Get the saw and some wood and pile it up. Pardon me. Here's another example of that with miniatures. I make these little miniatures in one of my videos about these miniature trucks and stuff. I make little cars and backhoes and tractors and things. And in order to make them, you have to have like the popsicle sticks and the toothpicks and the bits and pieces that they're made from, right? But you have to go buy those without having made any, you see? So what I did was I went to the store and I bought a bunch of these things. And then I had them. And then it was months before I used them. But it was okay because I only spent $15 or something on this stuff. Then, when I sat down and I started conceiving of what my next project was, what I wanted to build, I had all this material to feed into my thoughts of what shall I build. Just like when you decide you're going to do woodworking and you get some woodworking tool that you don't know about and you're not sure, but you buy it because you got it cheap or a friend was throwing it away, so you got it, and you just say to yourself, you say, I might learn to use that someday. Okay? That fits inside the area of having material. Now, I don't say you should collect old guitars if you have no interest in old guitars, right? But if you do have an interest in guitars, then you should collect a couple old guitars when somebody throws one away. If it's a quality thing, not just some made in China junk, then you should ask them, can I take that guitar there? Or if a friend's throwing away some old woodworking stuff, get that from him. Or computers, if you're into computers, the examples abound. Get the material, have the material. Use the material. Okay, like I said, you get some stuff and you build an end bench. You don't just get endless stuff so that you can build a house without ever building the end bench to begin with. Chinese proverb. The journey of 1,000 miles starts with one single step. All right, that's motivation. One step. That's where you go. When do you go there? You've got to have leisure time. You've got to make sure that whatever it is you're trying to do, you have time to do that thing. You can't work 2 jobs and have a bunch of kids at home and a wife to satisfy and say, I like to learn philosophy. Because when are you going to do that? So, there we go. I think that I could say more, and I think maybe I will. Maybe I'll do a part 3 to this video. But I don't think I can say more right now. So let's call it an end to that. Please patronize me if you like these short little off-the-cuff videos and these long, epic interviews. Some of these interviews have been great with Zero Gravity Media and Luke, with Onar, the secular churches recently. And I look forward to producing some good content with Gio from France. So patronize me, please, ladies and gentlemen, and help me let's make YouTube great again.